It always baffles me when I hear people say carnivore is easy, and I hear it constantly all the time in social media. It almost seems effortless for some people. And honestly, where I am right now, 5 years into carnivore, I'd agree. It's quite easy right now. But back when I first started, it definitely wasn't easy. Especially being a former carb addict and as someone who's failed many diets in the past. It got to a point where, in one particular moment, I nearly quit the carnivore diet. But here I am, 5 years later, still going strong. What changed? What's so different about carnivore, unlike the other diets I've tried? I want to talk about this because I know that a lot of people can relate to this. The intense carb cravings, the constant food noise, and the constant cycle of stopping and starting every single diet that you've tried. And in this video, I'm going to share with you this one strategy that I think helped me get through these carb cravings. Hi, my name is Joff. I'm a health coach and a former carb addict. I loved carbs. All of them. It was a huge part in my life growing up in many aspects. Culturally, emotionally, habitually, being a carb addict was my identity. For example, I'm Filipino. We don't just love our rice. It's a staple in the Filipino culture. There's even a saying that we have, rice is life. Rice in every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And my plate will always be loaded with the rice. If I put a number on exactly what percentage of rice was on my plate, it'd be around 80 or 90%. And of course, it wasn't just rice. Bread was always in the household. I remember as a kid waking up to the smell of fresh bread in the morning, and that smell was something that just made it feel like home. Fruit. And this one's a crazy one. Apparently when I was a toddler, I went to hospital because I ate too much fruits. I ate so much in one sitting that I got severe IBS. And later on in life, alcohol. And in particular, beer. That was my go-to drink. And that affinity towards carbs lingered with me until I was about 27 years old. And this was the time I was at rock bottom with my health. I was a metabolic disaster. Which it wasn't a happy story. I ended up in hospital with chest pain at around 1 a.m. in the morning. But that's a story I've already talked about in my previous video, which you can watch after this one. So every diet in the past that considered even getting rid of carbohydrates, even just a little bit, I had it on my mind that it was going to be a struggle. Whether it was portion control, like calorie counting, or substituting the white rice for the brown rice, because it's lower in calories, it would always seem so hard. Because let's face it, it was never really about the food. It was everything that was going on in my head. All these thoughts. Brown rice for a whole week? Ugh. FOMO of missing out on dessert in every party that I'm going to this month? The boredom of eating trimmed chicken breasts without any seasonings, with vegetables? Objections like that kept running in my mind. So what would I do? I would white knuckle myself through these diets, just use willpower to push through. And every single time, I would just revert back to my old habits, binging on carbs. But like I said earlier, carnivore was different. I started carnivore in the year of 2021, and I was already doing the keto diet before that, and it was a sort of a natural transition. But I recall the moment I said, yes, I'm going to stick to carnivore. At that time, I didn't set any expectations at all. I had no clue how long I was going to do carnivore or what the outcome was going to be. The one thing that I had promised myself, and I'd made it a clear plan, was at one point I was going to have a cheat meal. And so I gave myself a month. Let's experiment and see how strict I can be on carnivore. And as a treat, I'm going out with the family to a ramen restaurant. My favorite one, actually. And I'm going to buy a big nice bowl of tonkotsu ramen with an icy cold beer. That was something I looked forward to. And surprisingly enough, I said what I was gonna do. I stuck to carnivore for a month. And honestly, I felt amazing. I lost weight for sure. But the most surprising part was The mental clarity and the energy that I had was just something I'd never experienced before, not even on keto. And so I looked forward to this bowl of ramen and my icy cold beer. And the day it came, I'm sitting at a restaurant and I go all in. It was divine, a perfect pair. And I'm sitting there thinking, how amazing is this? How nostalgic. It takes me back to my foodie days when I traveled Japan. It couldn't get any better. But it hit me. Almost immediately, the novelty just wore off. And the next thing on my mind were these objections that I've had in the past. But this time, they were amplified by tenfold. A huge list just compiled in my head of these objections of why carnivore is going to be so hard. I'm so afraid that I could never have another beer on carnivore. I'm so afraid that I have to give up ramen for the rest of my life. I'm so afraid of the unbearable thought of FOMO that I'll have at every social event that I'll be going to moving forward. I'm so afraid that I'll never be able to enjoy family feasts in Christmas, New Year's, birthdays. I'm so afraid that I'll lose my identity as a Filipino or Asian because I don't eat rice anymore. I'm not kidding. These thoughts made me feel sick. I just clearly remember thinking that I can't do this. I've got to go back to keto. Carnivore for me is just not going to be sustainable long term. But after sitting on it for a day or two, something crazy happened. Something crazy happened that has never occurred to me before. After that ramen and beer, I felt absolutely terrible all around. Bloated, nauseated, exhausted, freaking moody. And honestly, it felt worse than a typical hangover. Almost as if my body was telling me off and kicking my ass for doing something wrong. And all I wanted to do was to go back into carnivore. And so I did. I jumped back on the train. And after a few days, it didn't take too long until things settled. And although I still had those objections on my mind, I said to myself, look, let's just give it a go for another month. And after a month, we'll do the same thing. I'll have a treat at home. I'll go buy a beer, put it in the fridge, and maybe I'll have something lighter, maybe some sushi. And so I went for round 2, another month of strict carnivore. Exactly the same. I set the time frame and I abstained from carbs. And again, same results. The weight came off, mental clarity, the energy, and I stuck with my guns. But this time, I sat down, had the beer, and I had the sushi. It didn't feel as great. In fact, I didn't enjoy it at all. It almost seems like I forced myself, just out of, oh well, I've already committed to a month of carnivore, I might as well commit to my treat meal. And then I realized that, hey, this actually works for me. This is totally different from what I've had in the past. I always used to struggle with carb cravings and I used to struggle with sticking to a diet. Things would almost always spiral and I'd find it hard to get back on track. And so carnivore worked when I set these time frames. Sometimes I'd commit to carnivore for a few weeks because I knew I had a party or a birthday dinner, and sometimes I could push it for a month. And each time I'd be successful, I feel good about myself, proud and confident. And the thing about these time frames, I don't think it was anything magical. I just think that every time I set an expectation that I actually do, I made sure it was something that I could 100% commit to. And I made sure I wasn't gonna fail. Any doubt that I had, I would just reduce the time frame. No pressure, no need to compete with myself or anyone else for that matter. And that's all it did. It allowed me to set those boundaries. And that's when things like the food cravings and the food noise just started to quieten down. Until one day I was just confident enough in myself to say, I'm just going to go strict carnivore for 6 months. And I remember I went ahead to the bottle shop, I got myself a 4-pack of Guinness, which is my favorite beer. I had one and I said, right, this is going to be the last. I put the rest of them in the fridge and said, in 6 months' time, I'm going to indulge. And I tell you this, 6 months went by. I had a look at the Guinness in the fridge and I thought, I don't need this. In fact, I don't want this. I'm good. The novelty is just worn out. I don't need a treat meal, no ramen, no burger, no rice, and life just went on. And at some stage, probably close to a year into carnivore, something clicked in my mind. The longer I went without carbs, or alcohol, the quieter the food noise got. The cravings that I would have just weren't as intense. In fact, it was nearly gone. Honestly, I can't properly explain what was going on or what was happening, but something in my mind was being rewired. And the closest thing I could think of is neuroplasticity. But that's only half of it. The other thing that I've realized is I wasn't really eating these foods, these carbs, because I was hungry. I ate or drank because I was filling a void. If I was stressed, if I needed excitement or something to feel good about, I ate and drank. If I wanted to feel like I was back in Japan as a foodie, I had some ramen or sushi with a beer. If I was bored and had nothing to do, I would eat or drink. None of that was hunger or thirst. Not once. And the less that I filled that void with food, the more clearly I could see what I was doing to myself all those years. All those objections in my head, they were real, but they were never about food. I was using food as an emotional bypass. And the reality check came in roughly a couple of years into carnivore. I remember I had a terrible day at work. I came home tired. Kids were upset. And I don't know what was going on that day, but I was done. And in the past, it was automatic. I'd reach out for a packet of chips or a cold one in the fridge. But this time, I just stood there and I had to force myself about thinking, man, I just want a cold beer. I just want some chips. But nothing. Even if I pictured it on my mind, I felt nothing. I felt no urge. I didn't want any of it. And that's when I think I reached food freedom. So if you're in the first few weeks of doing keto or carnivore right now, and you're finding it a big struggle, look, I'm not here to tell you that it's gonna be easy. Because in my experience, it really wasn't. What I can tell you is what worked for me, which was committing to an expectation that I set, a time frame that I knew I could actually 100% commit to. And I just did that on repeat. It was never about white knuckling or using willpower to get through these diets. I needed to learn how to trust myself again. And look, if you are curious about starting carnivore, I've got a free 12-week guide that walks through how I transitioned my diet into carnivore. Like I mentioned earlier, I started keto first, and I naturally gravitated towards carnivore. And I think there's a reason that worked better for me. And I've explained and mapped it all out in this 12-week guide. So if you want a copy, just click the link in the video description. And if you can resonate with any of the carb addiction, food noise, carb cravings that I experienced, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your story. Has carnivore worked for you, or are you curious to try? Leave a comment below and I'll respond back as soon as I can. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.